everyone. I am Lilly Stairs, and I am the Interim CEO of the American Autoimmune Related Diseases Association, or AARDA, as we affectionately refer to it, because that's a long name, and we're not going to say it every single time throughout this interview. I am also the founder and principal at Patient Authentic, where I help build programs to empower and educate patients. And I am a 3-time autoimmune disease patient living with Crohn's disease, psoriatic arthritis, and psoriasis. Welcome to Insight. It is AARDA's series of conversations to bring new information and compelling perspectives on issues of critical importance to people living with autoimmune diseases and the healthcare stakeholders that support us. This series is designed to contribute to our understanding of issues and ideas, best practices, and strategies for change in support of the autoimmune community and society. We are so incredibly fortunate to be speaking with Indy Lee, who is the founder and CEO of Indy Lee & Co. I am a big fan personally of Indy Lee. I love your CoQ10 toner and many of your other products. Indy has an extraordinary story to share with us, one that is inspirational as women, as business leaders, as an entrepreneur, and as a true champion for patients, particularly those with autoimmune diseases like myself. So in typical Indy style, you have been selfless in your time and commitment to our organization, especially this time of year during our annual campaign to raise awareness about the more than 100 autoimmune diseases that impact over 50 million Americans, which is just, every time I say that number, it's so startling. It's a lot of people. And so Indy, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with us. I cannot wait to dig in.
Oh, thank you so much. I am first of all, I'm a huge fan of you and what you do. And I think you already know AARDA is very near and dear to my heart. And it is my hope that through continued work, we're going to be able to elevate awareness for what AARDA is doing. And for the 50 million people that have been affected here in the US with autoimmune diseases, and so many more that have yet to been diagnosed.
Thanks, Indy. All right, so let's kick off. Tell us the Indy story. Share with us your journey that defined where you are today.
Sure, absolutely. So I didn't start out in beauty at all. I actually am an accountant, a CPA, and which most people are like, what? And I left to spend more time with my kids. And lo and behold, I am someone who has 10 fingers, 10 toes that are all green. My nose is green. I love to garden. And a friend of mine was building school gardens and I said, let me help. So I ended up building a very large 750 square foot greenhouse in my backyard dedicated to helping grow edible flowers and all the little plants, starter plants that we were going to go to schools to teach the farm to garden, farm to table movement. It was incredible. And in 2008, in about June of 2008, I noticed that my hands and my feet were really swollen. I couldn't open them in the morning. It took hours for me to unfurl those hands, which I'm sure many of these listeners sound very familiar. And I went to the doctor thinking, quite frankly, that I had Lyme disease. And that's when he said, I actually think this presents like rheumatoid arthritis. And I said, I'm too young. And he said, it is not an old person disease. Off I went to the rheumatologist, and he was right. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I wound up going on methotrexate for a number of years to get it under control, which fortunately it has been. And it was interesting because I wasn't able to work in the greenhouse or the farm because working outside in the humidity and the moisture just caused incredible flare-ups. So what's a type A personality to do with a lot of calendula and a lot of lavender? I started to make products for my nephew who was about to be born so I can unveil baby products that are clean right from the garden. I thought I was going to be like Martha Stewart. Like, it was crazy. And I created this little botanical baby line and had little miniatures made for the shower. And everybody said, oh my God, Indy, this is what you should do. You should create a line. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not. Clean wasn't on the scene back in 2008. I'm like, I don't think so. And they're like, no, I think there's something here. Of course, the universe was trying to tell me a sign and I was not listening. So the universe sends me a much bigger sign. And in October of 2008, I started to notice I was losing my peripheral vision. And I went to the doctors and I said, something's up again. And he said, okay, we need to go send you for a scan. And within 45 minutes of walking out of the scan, he called and said, you need to come in. Never what you want to hear from a doctor when you walk out of an MRI. And I said, just tell me what it is. Otherwise, I'm going to use Google or WebMD, something I'm quite sure that the listeners are used to. And I said, I have the keys in my hand. He said, okay, you have a brain tumor. And I said, I'll see you in 15 minutes. And Lily, I know you know this story. It was probably the most powerful day of my life. I always say my children are my highlight, but that was the most powerful. I realized in that 15-minute car ride where I didn't call anybody, I just got in the car and drove, that up until then, I spent the first 37 years of my life as a passenger and not an active participant. I knew this was happening for a reason. I didn't know what. And more importantly, I said from that day on, I was going to live every day with purpose, passion, and be fully present. Because as everybody who's listening knows, life is so precious and you never know when it's going to change in a heartbeat. And by the time I got to the doctors, I was actually transformed. I have to say, I was positive. I'm like, okay, I can handle whatever is being thrown at me. I just knew something remarkable was going to come. So I get there and I said, what do we have? And he said, I don't know. It doesn't look like cancer, and it wasn't. He said, but you really need to go see some specialists. So off I went up and down the coast, and most of the doctors would say, again, we're not really sure what this is. It doesn't look like cancer. And some of the doctors would say, but you need to get your affairs in order. It could be as little as 6 months. I'd be like, wait, what? No, absolutely not. And I went between the first two specialists, I went to my neuroendocrinologist. Now you have to realize this is 2008. I think that this is so progressive because I said, nobody in my family has any of this. Like, what could be the cause? And he said, well, we're seeing more and more of these things tied to the environment. I'm like, environment? Like, I eat very healthy. I was in great shape. I helped build the greenhouse. I was working outside. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, well, yes, of course, those are parts of your environment, what you surround yourself, what you breathe. He goes, what do you put on your skin? What did your mother put on her skin? And in that moment, Lily, everything changed. I knew, I kind of had that moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what this is about. I am going to create a line that's safe, that's effective. I want it to look beautiful on a shelf. And more importantly, I want to educate and empower others to live the healthiest version of their life. And I started creating. And it's interesting, everybody said, well, I don't understand. How'd you start? And the truth is, when you're given 6 months, you get really purposeful on how you're going to spend it. And so when I was with my kids, I was with, when they were home from school, I was with them. And when they were at school, I was researching a doctor to go see other specialists, and I was starting to create the line. Fortunately, I found a doctor who said, okay, I'll do surgery. I said, fantastic, let's do it. He said, well, we're going to do it on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. I took that as a really good sign. Like, again, the universe is like, maybe you should start to create a line. Maybe you should do this surgery on Earth Day. And I said, great sign, let's go. And walked into the surgical suite, said, today's a great day to live, put on some kick butt music, and let's go. And and when I went to sleep, I couldn't see from about here back. And when I woke up after many hours, I could see completely. And that's when the doctor came in and took my hand and said, we got everything. Welcome to the rest of your life. And I haven't stopped. And listen, they'll never know what the cause is. But for me, the fact that it could have been and knowing there's very little regulation was enough to propel me forward. And the fact that they think that this could be an environmentally derived and was most likely autoimmune related. And then having RA, having had pancreatitis and not being a drinker, having almost lost both children because my body was rejecting being pregnant. All those things the doctors have tied and said, these are all autoimmune markers. And that's why it's so important for me to talk with you and for me to raise awareness, because there are so many out there people who are struggling to figure out what they have.
Absolutely. Indy, your story, I've heard it before, but it always just blows me away. And there's so much that I could dig into in this story. I have the first thing that came to mind, and this is going to be silly, the first thing that I say, but it's just fun. When you say it's a great day to live, I love that. And it makes me think of Grey's Anatomy. It's a great day to save lives. I don't know. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please. When I went to surgery, I was waiting for McSteamy and McDreamy to come.
Yeah, that's. I think we all of us autoimmune ladies, which 75% of people with autoimmune diseases are women. I think many of us would probably love a
Oh,
McDreamy as our physician.
definitely.
Now, I can definitely tell you this is not something we've covered on Insight interviews before, so this is a first. But in all seriousness, no, your story is incredible, and your passion is so palpable, and I love that you've taken this experience and your diagnosis and been able to allow it to propel you to build this beauty empire, this clean beauty empire. And thank you for wanting to call attention to autoimmune diseases, because and I know that you have the RA diagnosis, but knowing that they're all interconnected, right? There's over 100 autoimmune diseases, but the root of them is all the same. And you mentioned you were on methotrexate. I mean, that is a medicine that treats many different autoimmune diseases, just like so many of the different medications out there. And that's why if we team up and we work together to raise awareness and we view autoimmune diseases from an umbrella perspective, we really can move the needle and create change. And I believe that pairing treatment and Western medicine with some of these, really thinking about what we are putting on and into our bodies
Absolutely.
is so important, whether you have an autoimmune disease or not. So I love that you're doing this work, and I related to so many different pieces of your story, and I'm sure many do, with your hands and your arthritis, and oh my gosh, how could I have an old person's disease? It's not.
And that I think was one of the biggest learnings for me, is realizing that no, that's not the case. And exactly then really doing the research and finding out how many people here in the US have that we know of have autoimmune diseases. And then when you compare it to the amount of research being done comparative to, say, other diseases, it pales in comparison, and yet almost double the amount of people have been diagnosed with it. And we really need to bring this to light. More important, there's so many people who are trying to understand what they have, and it's so difficult to do.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's something that we've been talking about a lot, and that we have championed for years, is that there is such a difficult journey for so many patients to get to a diagnosis or get to the right diagnosis. And, unfortunately, some of that stems from, patients, or I'm sorry, the medical community maybe not having as much familiarity with autoimmune diseases. It also stems from, with women, again, there's a great book called Doing Harm by Maya Dusenberry, and they talk about how women are not always taken seriously within our medical system, and that there's a lot of disbelief in pain and dismissal of pain, and it's leading to delays in diagnosis. It's a very real issue, and it's something that we need to be addressing. And I'm sure as a woman that you can appreciate that.
That is one of the largest reasons why I really feel that championing for this information is so important, because I've been a victim of that, where the people say, oh, it's nothing. Are you sure you're in pain? Or maybe you just need more sleep, or let's check your vitamin levels. And you go on and on and on, and nobody is really listening to you. And then depression sets in, isolation can set in, because you just feel like you're not being taken seriously, or maybe there's something wrong with you, in terms of like, maybe I'm making this up, and we get in our head, because why is any doctor listening to me?
And the symptoms overlap. It's just, oh gosh, we've got a lot of work to do.
I know.
People like you in our corner, and advocates like you in our corner. So, as you're this amazing entrepreneur, and I see that you're an advocate across everything that you do in a lot of different spaces. But what are your top 3 pieces of advice for autoimmune patients?
I think number 1 is not to get discouraged. Right? It's easy to get discouraged, but stand up for yourself. Keep going to different doctors. Your body, when something is not correct, and keep talking to find the right doctor for you. Don't settle, because it is your health.
Don't settle. I love that. I'm going to let you get to your next 2 pieces of advice, but I've got to jump in and say, I couldn't agree more. I had to go see a couple of different doctors. I am in Boston, which is arguably the world's hub of medicine, with some of the top hospitals and physicians. And I had to go get second and third opinions because I wasn't comfortable
Oh
with
God.
the diagnosis that I received from one of the, somebody who was considered to be a top physician. And I was right to go and get a second diagnosis and to, be with the doctor that I connected with and was going to really listen to and respect me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. And even if you find a doctor that you feel is giving you the right diagnosis, but you don't feel it's the right doctor for you, don't settle.
Yep.
It's your life. It is your life. Take control of it. I think the other one is create a support team, whether that's and I think it should be inclusive of your doctors as well as family or friends. You want to be able to have those people who you can talk to and lean on or lean into when you're having flare-ups or you're in the hospital, or having a day for someone to talk to and understand what you're truly going through. And I think educating them so that they really can support you the way that you need to be supported. And again, I think that's why having the research and having something like AARDA is so important. It's not just for the patients, it's also for allies of the patients.
Yes, I love that. And I like your point to educate your support network on how you need to be supported, because not everybody always knows the right way to handle it or how you want them to handle it. And we need to exhibit patience and understanding and empathy that they might, sometimes they may say something that upsets us. And we just need to gently tell them, that's not really helpful to me right now, but here's how you can help me.
That's just it. I really believe that by and large, most people are trying their best to be supportive, but sometimes if you haven't experienced what a lot of the patients who are autoimmune patients have experienced, you don't know how to be there for them. And they are frustrated because they've been trying to search for the answers, or they just can't feel better because they're trying all the different medications to see what works for them. Again, autoimmune is not one size fits all. There's so many different ways you can have it. As you said, over 100 different autoimmune diseases, and most people can have 3 or more.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And that's me, multiple autoimmune syndrome over here.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And no, it's a great point. And I just, my heart goes out to all of the people that are living with an autoimmune disease, and then those who are supporting, because it's it takes a village, and
it does.
We are living in the unknown. Those of us with autoimmune diseases, we're living in the unknown. We are hearing it's different for everyone. It's not a one size fits all approach. I was just talking to somebody who was diagnosed, she's still actually seeking a diagnosis, but thinks it's in the IBD Crohn's space.
Mm-hmm.
And, she said, I just keep hearing and reading it's different for everyone. And it's really frustrating because I want answers. And it was hard for me to tell her, unfortunately, that will continue. But I do promise that there are resources out there and people who can help you navigate. And that is thanks to organizations like AARDA and like the advocates like yourself who are out there sharing their story.
So, and then I think the third one is to do your own research as well. Really get to understand, read the books that are out there once you get the diagnosis, so that you can go in there and have, educated questions for your doctors and your practitioners, but really get to understand. And I would, always listen to your doctors, but also look into different modalities. And, for me, it could be massage, it could be acupuncture. It could also be looking at your diet. If inflammation is an issue like it is for me, looking into anti-inflammatory, diets, etc. And I'm not saying diets, but the way I eat is different. I notice my body flares up when I eat certain things.
Where are places that you can maybe tweak your diet? I know for me, I follow an 80-20 rule with things like gluten and dairy, which I feel better when I'm not eating gluten and dairy, but I also really love a pizza that's got gluten in it. So sometimes, once a week I have my cheat day and I go enjoy that. And so it's, having grace and treating yourself, being kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
Feel good.
This is not a dress rehearsal. So I agree with you. I'm an 80-20. I want to eat the cake. I want to enjoy the moments. That doesn't mean I have to still be mindful of what will then, there are sometimes repercussions to that. And the next day I might wind up with a flare, but knowing what the trigger is and being prepared for these things, I think is really is half the battle.
Absolutely. Knowing your body and learning and doing the research. All amazing pieces of advice, Indy. You're hired.
Great.
So, all right. As we think about how can other patients like make an impact on the autoimmune community?
I mean, for me, it's obviously teaming up with AARDA. That's obviously something that's very, hello, that's something that's very important to me. I mean, listen, you can go on the website and I feel like a commercial here, or infomercial, but there are so many different ways you can do it. My company, we did a walk, we're going to be doing more, for, Autoimmune Awareness Month. There are many different ways you can do it, but that's not the only way. It is researching, areas in your community that might have, the same diagnosis you have, or I happen to love, there's a new platform for people who are chronically ill. And so just really finding like-minded people who are going through your tribe, where you can have the conversation like, oh my God, I had this, or this is what the doctor said. And just having that place to kind of vent also, but just being with your people, I think is important. And you know what? It's so easy these days with social media. Like you can do a hashtag for autoimmune and you're going to get tons of things come up for, things that inspire you, information, seeing other people who are living and thriving with their diagnosis, because that's what we want to do. We want to live, we want to thrive with the understanding that, yes, we have a chronic disease. I think that's really important. And I think it's also staying social. It can be very lonely. It can be, especially now, isolating, certainly now with COVID and, the autoimmune community being at such high risk. Find ways to connect socially so you don't feel so disconnected.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That sense of community is so important. And organizations like AARDA and initiatives like what we're teaming up on, we'll be launching a big campaign in March. And, getting involved in those types of initiatives can be really rewarding as a patient. And so I encourage you, if you are living with an autoimmune disease, to Indy's point, find your tribe, find your community. And you can do that through organizations like AARDA and participating in some of our initiatives that we have going on to raise awareness and to raise funds to ultimately help drive some of this research.
So needed. So needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Indy, you are just a shining star.
Oh, thank you.
I am
right
so
back
grateful.
at you.
I am so grateful that we've connected and that you are an autoimmune warrior and a part of our community. I look forward to continued collaboration, and I thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story.